Welcome back to Save the Nation. I'm Hannah Catherine Smith. Many of you are rightfully concerned about COVID-19 regulations. Are they justifiable? Are they really based on science? And are they a violation of your rights? Luckily, in America, we have leaders like Governor Ron DeSantis who are pushing back against federal encroachment, and also grassroots activists who are passionate about making their voices heard. In America, we're still in the fight. But our allies and friends in Australia are living under different circumstances, with some of the government's regulations approaching the kind of tyranny most of us have only ever read about in history books. Here to fill us in from behind the lockdown in Australia is Evan Mulholland. Evan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Evan, my understanding is right now it's evening where you're at in Australia, and it's probably around 11 p.m. or so. You are locked down at 9 p.m., so you've been at home for a couple hours now. What is that like? What else is going on? What are some of the most egregious restrictions that you are having to face in everyday life?
Well, yeah, I'm here in Melbourne, Australia, where we're in our sixth lockdown. So if you're wanting proof lockdowns don't work, we're in our sixth. We've been in lockdown for a cumulative total of over 200 days, making us the most locked down city in the world. Wow. Here we've got a very harsh curfew. 9 p.m. you're not allowed to leave your house after 9 p.m. So if I was to go outside right now, I'd get about a $3,000 US dollar fine. If I wasn't wearing a mask, I would also get the exact same fine. Some of the rules are absolutely outrageous. You might have heard about the Sydney lockdown, which just entered its 9th week. They've got about 1,000 cases a day. They've got the army deployed patrolling the streets. They've got police helicopters moving people on from beaches. They even had a case where a rural council shot dead 15 rescue dogs because they didn't want anyone from neighbouring towns coming to rescue those puppies lest they give them COVID. So that's some of the harsh restrictions we're living with.
So I want to talk more about that because a video has been going around social media that shows an Australian news program talking about people being arrested for leaving their homes, as you just said. And so I want our viewers to take a look at this clip for a moment.
Among the most concerning cases, a COVID patient who's tonight on the run from a hotspot. Police and health authorities have issued an urgent appeal.
Anthony Karam knows he is COVID positive when he steps into this public lift, already breaking so many rules he doesn't bother to cover his mouth as he sneezes and splutters. The 27-year-old is still infectious but has gone missing from his Wentworth Point apartment. A warrant now issued for his arrest.
Evan, an Australian official tweeted out that the government will be building a regional quarantine facility in Queensland. In other words, it really seems like they're building a COVID camp. What do you think of this, and did you ever expect something like this to happen in your country?
This kind of thing would seem like a dystopian novel to people in America. Australia has a hotel quarantine system where the governments will rent out entire hotels and quarantine people in them for 2 weeks before they can enter society. Now, Queensland, that state, have done particularly badly at managing their hotel quarantine. They've had the virus leak out a number of times into the community. So what they're doing is building these camps which contain single block units for people to quarantine in for 2 weeks before they can enter society again. But what that is saying is that Australia, or at least that state of Queensland, is effectively going to have a permanent zero COVID elimination strategy, and they're never going to live with the virus. Now, their so-called vaccination targets of 70 to 80% before we open up to the rest of the world. But not even Israel, I think, have been the gold standard for vaccination, have got to that target. So effectively, what these state premiers are saying is that we're never going to get out of this elimination strategy. We're always going to try to eliminate the virus.
So 9 News Australia reported last year in October that 4 infants died in Adelaide because travel restrictions prevented them from being transported to receive the same life-saving treatments that so many people are seeking. Are these kinds of restrictions in place, and how has the healthcare been affected by these lockdowns?
The healthcare hasn't really been affected. We increased ICU capacity, and many of those ICU beds are sitting there empty. You're seeing harsh rules for that are supposedly based on science, but really for popularity purposes. And that's not the only example. A couple in New South Wales were denied from going into the northern state Queensland to see their prem baby. They were made to go back home. You've seen countless examples of people not being able to enter other states to visit their dying parents. The rules are absolutely punitive. And this is the kind of mentality Australia has been warped into. And people should be rightly looking on in horror, thinking that it can't happen in their own country, but it can, and it has happened in Australia. Americans could not even imagine the pain people are going through. In Victoria and in New South Wales, kids aren't allowed to go to school. In Victoria, here in Melbourne, kids have missed out the better part of a whole year of their education. That does a lot to kids' mental health. They need the social interaction, and we know that COVID affects kids much less than it does adults. They're not allowed to go visit each other at a playground. They're not allowed to go to school, and this is having a massive impact on not only the economy, but our country, small businesses. In the last 9 weeks, almost 500,000 people have lost their jobs in just the past 9 weeks. But the people making those rules, the bureaucrats, the politicians, they haven't lost their job and they haven't lost their pay at all.
Well, Evan, thank you so much for being with us here today and for giving us an up-close look at what's going on the ground there in Australia. We wish you the best of luck. Those of us here in the U.S. are cheering for you.
Thanks for having me.